Hey guys, what's going on? So, as promised, here's the full fan fiction uninterrupted of What If Darth Revan Trained Anakin Skywalker. I have added an extended true ending to the story per your guys' request. I hope you enjoy, and as always,
May the Force be with you.
now I must make a few things clear before we begin. In order for our story to make the most sense, I have altered Revan's story to best fit our video. Yes, this is still the same Revan we all know and love. I haven't altered his powers and personality, but in this alternate timeline, everything about Revan's story remains the same up until the events of Star Wars: The Old Republic, where I've decided that Revan never escapes his 300-year-long imprisonment until the events of the prequels, where it's made clear that over the centuries the following Sith to come would have drawn power from unknown space where Revan was located, using the dark side to keep him alive, but without ever fully knowing it. Revan would have also sustained his life force through the use of the dark side on his behalf as well. Revan's mind would still become shattered to the point where his spirit splits in two, his dark side half remaining in his physical body, and his light side half manifesting into a Force ghost. Revan, up until the events of The Phantom Menace, would be imprisoned until he would feel a massive surge in the Force. The Chosen One had been found. Finally gaining enough energy to free himself, he would take a shuttle and return to the galaxy. And that's where our story begins. As a desolate ship exits out of hyperspace, we pan in to see Revan, who was very bloodthirsty and in search of revenge. Revenge against the Sith and anyone who stood in his way. He could feel how things had changed, how the Force felt out of balance. He hovered over the planet of Tatooine, where he felt the surge in the first place. He knew the Chosen One was there. He knew exactly why he wanted the Chosen One. He wanted to use his powers as a means of accomplishing his goals, to defeat the Sith and any Jedi that stand in his way. As his ship entered the planet's atmosphere, he saw a shiny silver Nubian cruiser, and a large man and a little boy making a run for the ship. Seeing what was about to happen, he leaped out of his ship as Darth Maul was about to run Anakin over. But this time, Revan's purple blade pierced Maul's speeder and sent him flying into the sands. Qui-Gon immediately ignited his lightsaber as little Anakin ran for the ship as ordered. Revan knew this was the Chosen One and was prepared to do what needed to be done. Revan, in a heap of fury, lunged at Qui-Gon without hesitation. The two exchanged blows until Maul recovered and jumped into the fight. Revan knew Maul was a Sith, and he could only sense that he was the apprentice. The three continued to exchange blows until Revan had had enough and ignited his additional red lightsaber. The duel was already over. In one definitive slice, Maul was dropped to the ground and Qui-Gon stabbed through the knee. Both warriors lay dormant in the sand. Maul's eyes stained with hatred as he looked at his legs that had been severed from his torso. Revan turned to see Obi-Wan ignite his blue blade as Qui-Gon shouted for him to get back on the ship, but it was too late. Revan used the Force to disarm Obi-Wan of his blade as he fired a barrage of Force lightning at him, discarding of him like the trash he was. As Revan turned back to Maul and Qui-Gon, he saw Qui-Gon stare in fear, but not in fear of him. As Revan looked back to see little Anakin standing at the edge of the ramp on the ship. Wasting no time, he threw his saber at the ramp's support, dropping Anakin to the sands below. Qui-Gon yelled out, but before he could finish, purple plasma chewed through his stomach as Revan plunged his blade through his insides, ripping it out and kicking him in the face. Maul's eyes were as hot as Tatooine's two suns. He knew who this was. Palpatine had taught him of the ancient Sith and their old ways. Revan looked down at Maul and asked where the other Sith were, where Maul would tell him that there are no other Sith, just him and his master. The rule of two demanded that there can only be two Sith at a time, and that doesn't include him. That Darth Sidious will come for him. Revan sliced Maul's head off clean from his body. He kicked it aside, ending the Zabrak's life. Qui-Gon whimpered as young Anakin ran up to him, not afraid of the god that stood beside him. Qui-Gon looked up at the battle-hardened Mandalorian mask that Revan bared. Its tinted visor cast a glare directly into Qui-Gon's eyes, and in his final breaths, he asked Revan not to harm the boy as he died. Obi-Wan, still alive, was able to leap up and into Padme's ship as he sped off into hyperspace, leaving Anakin with Revan. He had to inform the council of everything that had just transpired, how Qui-Gon was now dead, and that the Sith had returned. Revan looked down at the scared little boy. He had never seen such power, such speed. It was almost astonishing. Little Anakin spoke, asking Revan what he was going to do. Revan, being the man that he was, gave Anakin a choice. Either he was to come with him and learn the ways of the Force and truly become the most powerful being ever, or he can die right here alongside his old master. Igniting his purple blade, he put it within an inch of Anakin's face. Anakin knew what he wanted, and so he kneeled and pledged himself to Revan's teachings. And so, from that day on, over the next 13 years, Anakin would train heavily under Revan, mastering the Force, learning the 5th and 6th of the 7 lightsaber styles like Revan had. The 5th style in particular was the most physically demanding, as it harnessed the user's ability to overpower one's opponent, to bring one's attack back onto him or her, and to always push your opponent back. Anakin would develop unbelievable muscle bellies and definition, just like Revan had. He would learn to master such Force abilities like telekinesis, Force choke, and Force sense, while always favoring Force choke. Revan was just as smart as he was powerful. He was always seeking new ways of accomplishing his goals. He was an expert in military tactics and strategy, and favored the idea of turning his enemies to his side through manipulation and corruption. He was an utterly ruthless Sith Lord, believing power to be everything, while ignoring any ideals of mercy or loyalty. Anakin would truly become the most powerful being in the galaxy under his teachings. Revan would have poured every ounce of knowledge he had into Anakin, making him an almost unstoppable force. The Anakin we got in Revenge of the Sith under Obi-Wan's teachings was nothing compared to the Anakin who was completely unlocked with no attachments to slow him down or waver his emotions under Revan's tutelage. Anakin wore the same black robes as he did in Revenge of the Sith, and bared the same mechanical arm after losing his organic one to Revan in a training duel. He would look exactly like he did in Episode 3, however much more powerful, and this time he would wield a purple lightsaber just like his master, being able to draw upon the light and dark sides of the Force. He wouldn't identify as a Sith nor a Jedi, but rather just an extremely powerful being in the Force, blending to his emotions and honoring his code. Finally, after 13 years, his training was complete. Planning to travel to Coruscant to kill Sidious and bring peace and justice to the galaxy. The time had come. They were more than ready. Revan could have taken Sidious all these years, but he decided that he would take his most prized possession and make him his own, to truly make the Sith suffer for leaving him enslaved all those years. That night, Anakin sat in his quarters, anxiously awaiting the arrival on Coruscant. He was more than ready to be unleashed upon the galaxy. But more than that, more than his desire for power, more than his desire to overthrow the Chancellor, he secretly desired to see Padme more than anything. It had been 13 years from when he last saw her, and he knew he had to see her. He would see her, and he wouldn't let his master step in the way of that. Anakin began to meditate, to try and foresee the events to come.
Stop now! Come back! I love you!
You are the chosen one!
Anakin's eyes snapped open. He didn't know what he just saw. What was that? What were those voices? Confused, he looked up, and then he saw a bright glowing orb floating around the room, and heard the voice of Qui-Gon. His old master had returned.
Do you believe you are the chosen one?
Anakin looked up at the glowing orbs, and next to him, he saw a blue figure appear. It was his master, but he was different. He didn't bear the same dark side energy that he felt within his master every time he simply passed by. Not knowing what to say or do, he just listened.
I believe you will bring balance to the Force, that you will face your demons and save the universe.
Qui-Gon continued to explain to Anakin that what he saw was his intended future, not what Revan had bred him into. Qui-Gon would explain that balance of the Force is not the same as balancing the light and the dark. The light itself is balance, the natural order of things, with the dark being the destabilization of that balance, a perversion of nature. The Force is balanced with supremacy of the light and eradication of the dark, not with the two sides being balanced in power. Anakin, now deep in thought, didn't say a word as Qui-Gon continued. He continued to tell Anakin that Revan himself is a perversion of the Force, that only his dark side half remains physical, while his light side half manifested himself into a Force ghost. Finally, Revan spoke.
You must kill Palpatine and destroy my dark side self. Bring back the balance to the Force.
Anakin stood to his full height and motioned for his lightsaber, but he quickly stopped as he began to realize that maybe the path he was going down was wrong. He was hit with flashes of him as a boy, the boy who won the pod race, the boy who promised to free his mother, and the boy who dreamed of being the greatest Jedi whom ever lived. Revan's ghost began to disappear as Qui-Gon told him that he knows what to do. Anakin was now more conflicted than ever. He wanted more power, and the only way to get it was through his master himself. But he also knew that deep down, Qui-Gon was right. He had to restore balance to the Force and fulfill the prophecy. He had already made up his mind. He was to await their arrival on Coruscant, kill Sidious with the help of his master, and then destroy his master once and for all. Anakin was disgusted with the man that Revan had turned him into, the man who became so blindsided by power. But he was no longer that man. He was the chosen one. Anakin would sit in his quarters. Their arrival on Coruscant was minutes away. Anakin would think about what would happen. He would play out all the possible events over and over in his mind. He reflected over the past 13 years. He thought about his master. How could he have been so blindsided? It was like he was wearing a blindfold and earmuffs his whole life, and they were suddenly ripped off. Anakin's path was now clear, and he understood what needed to be done. He kept his mind sharp and ready. He would feel the ship's turbulence, the way the coils and drag fins moved. He sensed the fuel line and the inner workings of the hyperdrive. Anakin had become so in tune with the Force that he could feel everything that was going on in the ship, every movement, every tilt or noise. And then his eyes opened. They were here. Anakin would stand and clip his lightsaber to his belt and exit his quarters. Revan would summon his apprentice to the hull of the ship. Anakin was very nervous. If just one thing went wrong, then everything he planned to fight for would be ruined. Anakin tried to stay calm, to mask his emotions from his master, but Revan was not easy to fool. Revan would explain to Anakin that the dark side showed no mercy, and that they were going to dispose of Palpatine as quickly as possible. Unbeknownst to Anakin, Revan had bigger and deeper ambitions than just getting revenge on Palpatine. Revan wanted power, unlimited power, and so he planned to take Palpatine's place and turn the Republic into the once great Sith Empire that he ruled over. Revan planned to rebuild the Starforge, or at least something close to it. He told Anakin none of this, as he sensed a great conflict within him. The moment Anakin's allegiance had shifted away from him, Revan felt a massive surge of energy in the Force, and he knew that he couldn't let his apprentice stand in the way of his plans. The ship would descend into the atmosphere, and Revan would tell Anakin to land right on Palpatine's private landing platform that led directly to his office. It was night, and there was a massive storm of thunder and lightning, accompanied by heavy rain. It was as if they were entering the very heart of the dark side itself. Revan and Anakin would land and exit the ship. There would be two Senate guards standing outside the doors to Palpatine's office. Within a blur, they were dropped to the ground, their bodies sizzling from the deep cut of Revan's saber. Anakin would use the Force to open the doors, and they would enter. Walking through the crimson red office, they both felt the energy that lay within, the darkness that clouded the minds of the Jedi. This was the right place. Revan would stare Palpatine dead in the eyes while Anakin stood next to him. Palpatine would have a look of shock, amusement, and a bit of pleasure on his face. He knew who this was. His master Darth Plagueis had taught him all about the ancient Sith and their history. Revan was no stranger, but what stood next to him, that was what intrigued Palpatine. Anakin looked conflicted, nervous, but battle-ready. Palpatine had heard of Qui-Gon's death on Tatooine, how he had found a little boy strong in the Force, a little boy whose midichlorian count exceeded that of Grand Master Yoda, a boy who was believed to be the chosen one. Palpatine had two options here. He knew that he wasn't strong enough to take the might of Revan and Anakin, but he also knew that if he ran, Revan would simply hunt him down. No, he was going to fight, exclaiming to Revan,
"It's treason, then."
In a heap of red fury, Palpatine lunged at the two warriors. They were more than ready. Revan's purple blade flashed down on Palpatine, forcing him to go onto the defensive. Both Sith Lords clashed in an unimaginable rage. Anakin struggled to keep up, but eventually found his footing, and together, Revan and Anakin force-pushed Palpatine into the wall. Palpatine quickly got back up and ignited a second lightsaber within his sleeve. The battle went on. Palpatine would hurl Force Lightning at Revan, but the mighty Revan chips would block it. It was used too diminished to fire it back onto Palpatine. Outmatched and now cornered to the edge of the room, Palpatine was out of options. In one maniacal last-ditch effort, he would tap into Anakin's emotions and discover a certain love he had for someone.
Ah, boy, do not let this garnet beast destroy me. Use your aggressive feelings and kill him. I sense in you a drive, a pursuit of something greater. Ah, yes, Senator Amidala.
Palpatine would then feel his entire body go numb. Anakin had lifted him in the air, and using the Force, he would slowly start to shatter all the bones in his body. And in the clench of his fist, the chains would snap. Anakin was finally free, his submission to the light and dark now unbound, as there was no allegiance. There was only the Force. Palpatine would drop dead, his body crinkled and broken. Revan would look to Anakin, who was stunned at what he had just did. Anakin then realized that there can't be the light without the dark, that the two must work in unison. The dark side must be contained, not eradicated. The dark side represents the worst of our emotions, while the light embodies serenity. The Jedi shouldn't shun emotion and attachment just because it leads to the dark. There has to be balance, and not balance with eradication of the dark, but true balance. Balance that lies between emotion and tranquility, drawing from the positive emotions of love and joy to strengthen the bond with the light side of the Force, but also inviting in the dark. Anakin is a light side user, but he must use the dark as well. Anakin's strive to do the right thing is what will keep him from being consumed, and it's within this realization that he truly becomes the chosen one. Anakin would leap towards Revan with his hand stretched out, choking Revan with the Force. Light or dark, it did not matter. Revan suddenly felt his throat begin to crush by Anakin's grasp. Using all of his might, Revan would turn and dramatically force push Anakin backward. He would then run out of Palpatine's office and get into his ship and speed off into the distance. Doing the same, Anakin would take Palpatine's shuttle and follow Revan throughout the galaxy. When they would come before a familiar planet, he knew where Revan was taking him, landing back at the same spot where everything changed, where Qui-Gon and Maul had died, and where Anakin first met Revan. The Dune Sea was quiet. Nighttime had eroded over the planet as Anakin hopped out of the ship to find Revan waiting for him. Anakin would tell Revan that he knew this was coming, that he had enslaved him all these years. Revan wasn't having any of this. To him, his most prized possession had just become his biggest threat. Anakin ignited his lightsaber as Revan did the same, both warriors standing feet away from one another. both circling each other. This was the defining moment, the galaxy-altering event, and yet there was something beautiful about it. Here we have this young man with a gigantic hole in his heart, that one missing piece that he's trying to fill, and here we have this broken warrior, a man out of time, who's also trying to fill that missing piece. The difference is that Anakin has found his missing piece, the beautiful thing that's kept him going, the thing that defines his character, the beating heart of his humanity, Padme. Revan thinks that by exacting revenge and gaining more and more power, he's filling his missing piece, but he's not. He's only losing himself further into the darkness. Anakin has everything to lose, while Revan has nothing. And so, the two warriors stare each other dead in the eye. Anakin breaks the silence and tells his master, "I am done letting the dark side cloud my mind. I'm done searching for revenge. Revenge that I never wanted. It was all you. I never had a choice. But now my path is clear to me." And
If you're not with me, then you're my enemy.
Revan would sense Anakin's emotions. He would feel that love he had for Padme, that strong, deep love that he hadn't felt in centuries, that deep, strong love he had once felt for another, and that deep, strong love that reminded him of his old self, the man that blew up the Starforge, the man that killed Darth Malak, and the man that saved the galaxy. Revan hadn't realized that he charged Anakin when...
You will go on to defeat Malak. This I have little doubt. He will have gone from being the Sith Lord himself to the savior of our galaxy.
Savior, conqueror, hero, villain. You are all things, Revan, and yet you are nothing. And in the end, as the darkness takes me, I am nothing. Now I know how you felt, my friend.
You said you loved me. This may not be the best time to say it, but I love you too, with all my heart.
Revan looked down to see the lightsaber wound. Anakin, in one swift strike, had swung his blade right through Revan's abdomen. Falling backward, Anakin caught Revan as he held his fallen master in his arms. Revan removed his Mandalorian battle mask, and in his final moments, he told Anakin that he was right. He told Anakin to pursue his love for Padme, that he himself once pursued that same love, but eventually he became blinded by power. In his final moments, Revan would realize that it wasn't the revenge or the lust for power that brought him back. It was his humanity, as Revan's light side force ghost appeared in front of them. Literally and metaphorically, Revan had found his missing piece, as his force ghost finally merged with his physical body. Revan would then die in Anakin's arms, truly one with the Force. In that moment, Anakin didn't feel hate or anger for his fallen master, but only empathy. Anakin would realize that Revan was simply misunderstood. Revan, just like Anakin, was a victim who decided to victimize. Anakin knew he couldn't let himself become that, and for the first time, he felt compassion for his master. In the end, Revan was the only person who Anakin could relate to. They both felt a mutual love for someone, and that's what Anakin would hold on to. Revan was now dead, and Anakin would bury his former master's body in the sands of Tatooine. Anakin knew now what he had to do and where to go. He would take Revan's lightsabers with him and board his ship and travel back to Coruscant. He had to find Padme, but he didn't know where she lived. What he did know was that she became a senator and had heard her broadcasts on the HoloNet over the years. Anakin would think to himself and decide to head to the only place he knew where she could possibly be, the Senate building. He would land and enter the Senate. Nobody knew who he was or where he had come from. The Senate would be in shambles with the death of Palpatine and the resurgence of what the Jedi thought to be the true Sith. Everything would be unstabilized. Anakin did not care, however. He knew he was on the right track. Suddenly, he would then bump Into a Revenge of the Sith aged Obi-Wan Kenobi. He would look at the Jedi. His presence was familiar. It was as if he had seen him at least once before. He would ask the Jedi where he could find Senator Padme Amidala. Obi-Wan would ask who he was and why he wanted to see Padme. Anakin had no reason to lie, and he would tell Obi-Wan that he was Anakin Skywalker, and that Padme was an old friend he had met years ago on Tatooine. Obi-Wan's eyes began to widen. He knew who this was. This was the boy that Qui-Gon had spoke to him about over the comlink. This was the boy whose metachlorian count exceeded that of Master Yoda. Kenobi would look shocked. He told Anakin that he thought he was dead, that he thought the mysterious figure that killed Qui-Gon also killed him. Anakin would tell Obi-Wan that that mysterious figure was indeed Darth Revan, and that he took him and trained him. Anakin told Kenobi that Revan was now dead, however redeemed and now one with the Force. Kenobi would ask if they were the ones who killed Palpatine, and Anakin would tell Obi-Wan that Palpatine was a Sith Lord, and that they did what needed to be done. Kenobi would put his hand on Anakin's shoulder and tell him to make his plea to the Senate, to tell the senators what he had just told him. Anakin would grudgingly agree, and the two would walk out into a Senate pod. Anakin would then reveal to the Senate how Palpatine was the one behind everything, and how he was the Sith Lord the Jedi were looking for. The Senate would gasp. Anakin would then tell them that Palpatine committed many war crimes, and that he has proof. Before Revan took off to Tatooine, he snagged the security footage data tape from Palpatine's office, so he could enact his plan to take his place. But now that Revan was dead, Anakin was in possession of the tape, and would share the whole recording to the Senate. Everyone would hear Palpatine hurl Force lightning and ignite his crimson saber. The Senate would be lit with chatter. Anakin would then step down and would ask Kenobi where he could find Padme. Kenobi told Anakin where she lived, and he would allow him to take a speeder to her apartment. Kenobi would then go to the Jedi Council and tell the Jedi of everything that had just transpired, how Anakin was alive, and how he had killed the Chancellor and his master Darth Revan. The Council would ask Obi-Wan to bring Anakin in, as they would like to speak with him. Yoda was under the impression that they should possibly allow Anakin into the Order, how they could help him get over his darker emotions and hone his skills as a Jedi. He wouldn't require training, but rather further guidance with the light side of the Force to truly set him on the right path. It was now night, and Anakin would be accompanied by Captain Typho up the elevator to Padme's apartment. Anakin would be beyond nervous. It had been 13 years since he had saw her, and what if she wanted nothing to do with him? The doors would open, and Captain Typho would announce that Padme had a visitor. She would walk out and see Anakin standing there. It took her a second to realize who this was, and then she would say,
Annie?
Anakin would speak and tell her how he felt. He would tell her that he didn't die on Tatooine, that the mysterious figure that killed Qui-Gon took him and ruthlessly trained him over the years. He would tell her that the only thing that kept him going was thinking about her and his mother, how he knew he had to see them again. He would tell Padme that he was willing to give up everything for her, and that he didn't want to live a life of hate and anger. He would continue and explain that he had killed his master and Palpatine, who was secretly the Sith Lord behind everything. Padme would simply just run up to Anakin and give him a hug. She couldn't deny his attractiveness, nor the fact that he was willing to give up everything for her, even though she hadn't seen him in 13 years. In this storyline, Anakin wasn't a Jedi, so it wouldn't be forbidden for him to fall in love with Padme. Finally, he had found happiness.
I love you.
Anakin, after spending the night with Padme, would walk out of the room in the morning to see Obi-Wan standing there. He would ask if Anakin could come with him to the Jedi Council. Anakin would agree, and the two Jedi, or I should say one Jedi, headed off to the Jedi Council. Entering the chambers, all the Jedi Masters would be sitting there, and then they would ask Anakin to speak about Revan. Eventually, Anakin would tell them everything, and Yoda, Obi-Wan, Kit Fisto, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and Aayla Secura would ask Anakin if he would like to enter the Order, how they could train him to perfect his light side abilities. Anakin would stand there, contemplating the decision. He knew he wanted to live a life of righteousness and do the right thing, but he also wanted to live a life with Padme. he would stand there and finally make a decision. He would say no. He told the council that he was to follow the will of the Force and the will of his heart. He would walk out, leaving the Jedi behind him. Eventually, Anakin and Padme would get married and move their things to Naboo. The two would live a happy life of passion, harmony, and love. The galaxy would see true peace, or so it seemed.
Ah, Revan, I knew you'd fail. Now it is time for me to do it myself.
I hope you guys enjoyed that fan fiction. I really like to go in depth on what exactly would happen if certain scenarios didn't play out the way they did, or if they completely changed. Let me know what new fan fiction you'd like to see next, and I will see you all in the next episode of Star Wars Story. Until then, my fellow Jedi and Sith friends, remember, the Force will be with you always.